welcome to our second Pride Month panel. And of course, happy Pride to everyone. I am so excited to have a second panel this month. I mentioned during our first panel that it has been such an honor and such a joy to be working with a company and be working with a group of authors where I actually have enough authors to do more than one LGBTQ plus oriented Pride Month panel chat. It hasn't always been the case. Publishing does move very slowly when it comes to representation sometimes. So I'm truly honored and so happy that we are now in a position where we have so many authors that we can talk to and so many books that we can talk about in all kinds of different genres. So I'm just truly excited to get to be a part of that conversation. And, just like I mentioned the last time, for me, especially as a queer individual, it is just it's such a joy to get to have these conversations. And after that, like semi-serious note, just if you see me shoving something off to the side, it's because my cat has decided to try and join the conversation. Normally it's the dog trying to join. She's here too. I'm sure she will try to also make an appearance. Who knows? I live in a zoo, as you guys have well seen by now. Hopefully all of the animals will keep it together for the next hour. But as always, please come join our conversation. If you have questions for our authors, please drop those in the comment section down below. As always, everyone who leaves us a question will be automatically entered to win a flash giveaway. I haven't picked the book yet, but it's going to be really fun. You guys know me. I love to give everyone my favorite books, so you're going to want to enter because I always like to pick out the really fun ones. But leave us a question sometime during the hour. You'll be entered to win our giveaway, and we will try to get to as many questions as possible during this chat. And as always, just come join us in the comment section. Do you have a response to a comment? Do you want to be part of the conversation? Please do so in that comment section. Myself and my fellow admin will be hanging out in the comment section. We love talking to you guys, so please come join the conversation with us. As I said, I'm so excited to have this panel. We have three incredible authors with three very different types of books. So I'm so excited to have this chat. I think it's going to prove very interesting to get everyone's different perspectives. So we are being joined by two of our book club returnee authors, which is always exciting. We have Robyn Gigl, Amy Spalding, and first-time joiner to our book club, CJ Connor. Cannot wait. I am so excited to talk to all three of these authors. So you're not here to hear me ramble. Let's go ahead and bring them on screen. Please, book club, join me in welcoming our three special guests, and let's get our Pride panel started. Hi, authors. Thank you so much for joining our Between the Chapters book club this evening.
Oh, thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Y'all know that I love talking to everyone, so I am so excited to have all three of you here, especially our two returnee authors, and super excited, CJ, to get to introduce you to our book club members. I am so happy. This is going to be such a great panel. So let's just kick things off right off the bat. I'm going to have each of you introduce yourselves, tell our readers a little bit about your book if they are not familiar with your work. And let's go ahead and start with Robyn Gigl, just because you are first on my screen right now. So sorry, I'm going to try to mix it up. I won't make everyone go first every time, so I'll try to be fair. But Robyn, how about you kick us off?
Sure. Thank you. And thank you so much for inviting me. And thank you to all you folks out there for being here. Happy Pride. So my name is Robyn Gigl. I am, in addition to being an author, I am an attorney and an advocate on behalf of the LGBTQ plus community. My books are the Aaron McCabe series. They are legal thrillers. The first one, By Way of Sorrow, was published in 2021 and called Quietly Groundbreaking by the New York Times. The second one was published in 2022. It's called Survivor's Guilt, and was one of the New York Times best crime novels for 2022. And the one that was just published in May, Remain Silent, is the third in the trilogy, and there will be a fourth, hopefully. And again, they all deal with Erin McCabe, who is a criminal defense lawyer. She's young, she's attractive, she's feisty, and she also happens to be a transgender woman. And she and her partner, Dwayne Swisher, represent people in criminal defense, um, trying to get them out of the troubles that they find themselves in. And it's fitting because, as I said, I am an attorney in addition to being an author. Been practicing law for 45 years. And I too am a transgender woman. So, the old bromide, write what you know. You know, I'm a lawyer, been practicing law for 45 years, done a lot of criminal defense. And so that's how I came up with Erin McCabe.
Hopefully you don't get into quite as many of the messes as Erin McCabe, but she is very feisty, so she is very fun. So that's okay. But as long as you don't get into the kind of trouble she does, I think we're okay.
Trust me, she has a much more exciting life than I do.
Perfect. All right, and then I am actually going to hop over to CJ next. Since you are new to our group, why don't you introduce yourself and tell our readers about your upcoming book?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really honored to be here. My name's CJ Connor. I just realized I didn't put my pronouns next to my name, but I use he, they pronouns. And yeah, I write in the cozy mystery genre, sort of the cozy mystery subgenre, which is cozy mysteries with queer main characters, which has been really exciting to see that subgenre grow over the past few years and get its own name, which is really cool. Yeah, my debut book, Bored to Death, is the first in the Board Game Shop series, which follows an English professor, Ben Rosenkrantz, who returns home to run his dad's board game shop. And, misadventures happen. He finds himself in the middle of a murder investigation by accident and has to sort of prove his innocence with the help of the flower shop owner next door, named Ezra. Yeah, I'm really excited for it to come out. I'm working on the sequel right now, which is set around a Rubik's Cube competition, which has been really, really interesting to research. And yeah, and as far as outside of writing goes, I'm a big board game nerd, mostly through my husband, who's very, very into board games and role-playing games. Yeah, I have a Chihuahua. that's not really anything related to the book, but she's right next to me. So
I always love to know about people's
Mhm.
pets. Always tell me about your pet, especially if they are nearby.
Mhm.
Well, thank you, CJ. And I will say, readers, if you are on Twitter, please go follow CJ on Twitter because I love your Twitter account.
Oh.
Like every time I see a tweet come through, I'm like, oh yeah, like your tweets always bring a smile to my
Oh,
face. So if you're on
that's really
Twitter,
kind.
yes. So definitely, readers, go follow CJ on Twitter. I'll try to remember to put the handle down in the comment section later. And that's also why I'm drinking coffee right now, so I can remember to do all these things that I'm telling myself I will do. But we will also be circling back around in a little bit because I definitely want to talk about board games at some point during this chat. So we will come back to that. But for now, I'm going to jump over to Amy. Amy, you were recently a guest here in our book club, but just in case any readers have missed out on that chat, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your book.
Great. I'm Amy Spalding. I just panicked, made sure I was following CJ already on Twitter because that's how my brain works. I was. I feel like I have no pets nearby because I'm at my day job right now, and I'm very sad about that. But I do have 2 cats and a dog, if that's relevant info to people. My latest book is actually I've been a young adult author for many years, like 10, but for her consideration, my latest book is my first book for adults. It's an adult romance set in Hollywood about a woman who basically ghostwrites celebrity emails for a talent agency. And when she gets some potentially negative feedback on her email, she has to meet with an up and coming out actress to, improve her performance. But obviously, romance and shenanigans ensue. So it was really fun. I've worked in film marketing my whole career. And so, like Robyn, I was definitely pulling in from my work experience working in Hollywood and how it has a, you know, reputation for being very glamorous and like red carpets and all of that. And a lot of it is just like nerds with Excel spreadsheets and other Microsoft Office suite products, like doing work in buildings, like under fluorescent lighting. So I really feel like that's what I bring to the party. I was like, oh, you think Hollywood's cool? It is nerds. So it was fun to get to write like sort of like that kind of behind the scenes look at Hollywood. And I'm what I couldn't share when I had my book club interview that I can tell now is this is the first in a Out in Hollywood series. So the next book will be out in 2024, and that's called At Her Service, which is if you've read For Her Consideration, there's an assistant named Max, and so it'll be her story. And then I'll just say I think there's going to be some more to come. So I'm really excited to like get to really dive into this world.
Yes, I also had to like really keep in that news during our last chat. Readers, I can say like I know what the book is like. I know the general storyline for the book, one of the perks of working in the publishing house, but trust me, you're going to be really excited about it. I can't wait to actually be able to talk about it more. It's going to be really fun. So, but I will also say
it is. We'll just plug it. It's available for pre-order now, and you can look at the cute cover.
Yes.
The illustrators did such an amazing job replicating like the good things about the For Consideration cover, but also like making it new and fresh. So I'm so excited.
Yes, very much knocked it out of the park. Well, this is perfect. Thank you all. I always love getting to hear authors talk about their books in their own words because, you know, as a reader, but also as a marketer, like I think I know what the book's about. I think I know what the fun parts are, but to me, it's always so much more interesting to hear what an author thinks is like, this is what my story is. This is what it's about. So I just love hearing it in everyone's own words. All right, so we do have a question from a reader, and normally I try to direct the question like to a specific person and like kind of do a round robin, but this is a little bit of a heavier question. So whoever wants to go first in the answer can just raise their hands and we'll just take it in that direction. But I do love this question from this reader. They're wondering if anyone has advice or would be able to share some insight into the best way an ally can, you know, utilize good judgment when asking a member of the LGBTQ plus community to help them learn or understand something regarding, you know, members of the community, or maybe just regarding situations that are, you know, things are always changing these days in the news. So what is a good way that an ally can learn more about things they can be doing, things about the community in a way that doesn't burden the community to ask questions? You know, it is a bit of a tightrope sometimes. So, you know, does anyone have advice that they would like to share just from your perspective, you know, from being within the community itself? Yeah, go ahead, Amy.
I like raising my hand. I feel like I'm in school. One thing I will say is that I think a lot of people mean really well, but sometimes I can tell I'm like the only queer person someone thinks they know. And so it's like I don't know them very well. And they're like, hey, here's a thing I just learned about transgender people. Will you tell me about it? And I'm like, I'm a middle-aged cis lady. I'm sorry. Like I could maybe direct you to some resources, but like, I'm not sure. I don't want to be the only voice you hear on that. Like,
right.
Sometimes I feel like people they're so grateful to have someone they like feel comfortable with, but like sometimes it puts you on the spot. So I would say like make sure it's someone that like maybe you're kind of sure they have that comfort level back with you, and that you're not just sort of like, hey, instead of Google, can you just tell me something?
Right.
And because I absolutely have had people say like, oh, why do you choose to use this word? Or like, hey, I saw this flag. What does it mean? Do you know? Which feels very different than like just like, hey, I'm afraid to type something into Google. So will you just tell me? Because I don't know, I saw a rainbow on your desk. So it feels like you probably have the information.
Right. I do think that's very important. And I like what you said at the start, where it's like, you know, you don't want to be the only person that person knows that, you know, they're coming to talk. You want a relationship with that person. I do think.
But that
said,
I do value that. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yes.
on the other hand, I'm like, okay, well, if I'm the safe person, I'd rather you come to me than like just be a jerk. But at the same time, you know, emotional labor and all that.
100%. And then Robyn, are you raising your hands? Go next.
I am, because I agree with Amy. And I always try to tell people, look, if you wouldn't go up to somebody and say to them, have you had a hysterectomy? Or, have you had this? You don't ask somebody, about certain personal things about their body.
Right.
I am an out and proud transgender woman. I speak often. So I am comfortable talking about me, but not all trans people, not all queer people are comfortable talking about themselves. So the first and foremost, I'd say, be respectful of the person's privacy and who they are. And if you wouldn't ask a medical question to somebody else in similar circumstances, don't ask it to a trans or a queer person. And then, as Amy said, if it's somebody that you're comfortable with, as somebody who's a member of the community, I want people to learn. I want to help educate them. That's the way we build allyship.
Right.
But as you said, in the buildup, there's that fine line, and you have to know the person, and you have to kind of make sure that they're comfortable. So always leading off with, is it okay if I ask you something? It's a good way to start, because if they're not comfortable, they might say, I don't feel so comfortable talking about that. And every person's different. So be respectful.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point. CJ, do you have anything to add, or has it all been covered from your perspective?
I honestly don't think I could have said it better than that. Just gauge their comfort level. Think about, what kind of relationship you have with that person. I think that's really good advice, and I couldn't have said it better.
Yeah, absolutely. I also agree that I think that's a really great way to look at it, especially from the perspective of allyship. From a more personal standpoint, I definitely, I come from the South. I have a very large family that is not very understanding. So when I came out, it was very rough. But luckily, I did have my mom, who didn't know much, but she would make the effort to learn and would come to me after the fact to say, I saw this. Can you further explain it? Or what is the difference between? And I think that that's also really important, is show that you've put in some of the effort already, and then, say, but I still have questions. What is your perspective? I also think that's very important. So great question from that reader. Thank you so much. I didn't even think to have that type of question in my notes. So thank you. That was a great one. All right, I'm going to jump over to, I love this question too from this reader. This is really fun. So this is for everyone. And like I said, I will kind of direct as we go. So how do you think your main character would handle being in each other's genres outside of the genre you wrote in? So let's start with Amy first on this one. I know you went first on the last one, but you volunteered on that one. So I get to pick on you for this one. So how do you think your main character would handle being in a legal thriller or in a cozy mystery?
Well, the thing about Nina is she listens to a lot of true crime podcasts. So I feel like she'd be like, my moment has come. I know how to do this. And then she would swiftly panic and probably sabotage herself.
Right.
But I do think she'd have an initial, my whole life has been leading to this. So
right. I agree.
Everyone who consumes podcasts, right? We're like, oh yeah, I could solve a mystery. I got all the clues. I'll do it.
I agree. I do think Nina is the type to say, okay, I've got this handled, and then 5 minutes later be like, oh, this is how it goes. Never mind. I take it all back.
No, I can't.
All right, perfect. And then CJ, how about for you? Readers have not gotten to meet your main character yet. So how do you think your main character would handle being in a legal thriller or in a rom-com?
Oh, wow. Thinking of Ben in a legal thriller stresses me out, because he's a
poor Ben.
Yeah, I feel like he can just barely handle the level of, cozy mystery that he's in, but just with his anxiety and learning how to be an amateur sleuth. I've read and really enjoy a lot of the Aaron McKay books that you've written, Robyn, and I really enjoy them. But with Ben not having that kind of, attorney background and ability to keep calm under pressure as much, I don't know you'd have much of a chance. As far as a rom-com goes, one thing that's kind of fun about Bored to Death is it's a little bit of a rom-cozy. There's a little bit of a side romance between Ben and another local business owner, florist. So I feel like that would be a little bit more his speed potentially.
I was about to say, I do feel like Ben would be pretty comfortable in like a rom-com situation, but you know, I'm also very much like Ben. I think if in my mind, because I do also listen to podcasts, I'm like, yeah, I could handle a true crime situation or a legal moment, and then no, you would not go well. So
yeah, for sure.
100%. I do agree with those assessments. And then Robyn, I think this could be the most interesting one. How would Erin McCabe handle being in a cozy mystery and a rom-com?
So first of all, I think she'd do great in a cozy because she'd be there helping Ben. I mean,
right.
Ben is relying on his friend who owns the flower shop next door. Erin would be like, "Here, let me help you. I'm an attorney. I can, you know." And her partner Dwayne is a former FBI agent, so they'd be there helping Ben, you know, all along. And in terms of being in a rom-com, there is a storyline within all three books. I mean, they're all standalones, but the characters develop as you go along. And one of the storylines is that in the first book, Erin meets a guy, Mark Simpson, and they begin a relationship. And it allows me to explore Erin's, you know, sexual orientation and where she is and how she's evolving. And it also allowed me to explore Mark being a cisgender heterosexual guy who finds himself falling in love with a trans woman. And that relationship develops over time. So I think Erin's already, you know, there's that little I don't want to call it a com because it's not, you know, but it's
it's not a very funny story.
But it's a romance that's going on. So I think she'd do well. And hopefully Erin and Dwayne get out to Hollywood one of these days. You know, I'd really like to see that. So.
There we go. All right. I do think we may have just unlocked a potential future crossover for Erin McCabe across all three. We may have to reevaluate that at a later date. All right, perfect. Love that question. So thank you to that reader. That was a really fun question to do. All right, I'm checking. Okay, I'm gonna jump over to one of the questions that I had prepped, and then we will jump back over to our reader questions for a little bit. So I'm curious, you know, what do you think? Sorry, I wrote it. I already wrote my question, but now I'm like, I don't know if I phrased it the way I want to phrase it. So I'm gonna read it how I wrote it, and then we may have to rephrase as we go. What do you think is the difference between stereotyping a character or, you know, someone in a marginalized community and making them relatable when crafting their story, especially with, you know, a background of like a character who is, you know, queer or part of the LGBTQ+ community? Where does that line rest? Because, you know, it is kind of a fine line sometimes to get away from just a straight up stereotype and actually making them relatable to many people in the community. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on it, because it is a little bit of a bigger question. So I'm so sorry to do this to you, but CJ, you are up first in the round of people I pick on. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, and that is a very sometimes difficult thing to think about. And I think part of what it comes down to is basing a character off of, you know, real lived experiences of someone with that identity, whether that is, you know, your own identity or potentially, you know, having beta readers or a sensitivity reader to make sure that you're portraying that in a way that's thoughtful and respectful and not, you know, maybe relying on stereotypes. Just off the top of my head.
Yeah, I think that's great. I will say I love that we've seen a bigger rise in sensitivity readers throughout the industry recently. I think they're so important. So I'm glad that you in particular gave that note and shout out. Robyn, how about you next? You know, how do you find, you know, how do you balance that? Balance not stereotyping a character, but making them relatable all the same.
I think what you have to do is have fully developed characters. So in the case of Erin McCabe, she's an attorney, she's a woman, she's got a love life, she's got a family, and yes, she happens to be transgender. And so it's just part of who the character is. And as long as you have well-developed characters that are three-dimensional, whether it's the main character or a peripheral character, that's gonna, make it seem real, and you're not going to be stereotyping. And I agree with CJ. In By Way of Sorrow, the first character that I came up with when I was, plotting out the book, I shouldn't say plotting because it was really a pantser. I flew by the seat of the pants. Was Charisse Barn, who's a young, 19 years old, Black, trans sex worker who's accused of murdering the only son of a rich and powerful politician. Well, I am not a young Black trans sex worker. And so, yes, I could write how I thought the character would be, but I needed to make sure that this was authentic to who this person was. And so, as CJ said, I did use sensitivity readers to make sure that this was again, a fully developed three-dimensional character who wasn't a stereotype. This is who she was, but that doesn't mean doesn't have other things that make her a real live human fictional character.
Right.
And so, yeah, again, you avoid the stereotypes by making your characters real.
Right. I think that's a great response. And then Amy, let's jump over to you. How do you tackle this?
Yeah, I mean, Robyn, when you lead with character, you tend to I don't want to always say get it right, because obviously, yes, sensitivity readers, especially when you're writing identities outside of your own, sometimes even when you're writing your own, because you're like, I'm still only one person. So it's like, I know my experience is not going to be identical to others. The other thing is, I don't know if you all feel like you have to juggle this sometimes too. Sometimes I want to use stereotypes because there are stereotypes within our communities that I actually think are very fun. And so for example, if I, there are jokes in my book about Nina's I hope people, she's going to have her first meeting with Ari Fox. And she's like, I hope Ari knows I'm queer, because she's got long hair. She's very femme. So she's switches out her nice shoes, her Birkenstock. She's like, oh, I wish I still had my septum ring. Because there are also stereotypes you sort of want to acknowledge and tip your hat to. So I sometimes feel like I'm doing that balance of I'm not saying all of us, I'm just saying some of us. And I'm saying, these are little touchstones that are little fun things to drop in. So, I feel like I'm just making sure that I'm showing that there's other kind of queer people, and I still want to make some jokes. So delicate balance, sensitivity readers, all of that.
Yeah, and I do agree. I do think it is very much a delicate balance. But like you said, I do also think part of it comes from, especially for the instances where you're writing within your own community or from your own community perspective, then you do have a little bit more leeway to make those jokes, make those little, a tip of your hat, because it is something that is a personal experience to you. But like Robyn, CJ, like you both mentioned, sometimes, especially if you're going outside of your own community, it's very helpful to do a very well-rounded character and then also get feedback. So those are great answers across the board. Thank you, guys. All right, I'm gonna do one more of my questions because we've kind of led into it already, but there are some really fun questions from readers that I want to make sure we get to, is why I'm hesitating. But I do want to talk about, we've been talking about how all three of you are members of the LGBTQ+ community. Your books feature characters from that community. But I do also want to acknowledge that your books are not solely queer books. They are books with, we were just talking about well-rounded characters. They are stories with well-rounded plots and stories that happen to feature queer characters and queer stories. So I did want to take a few minutes to talk about that and talk about, when you were writing your book, was it a conscious choice that you knew going in that it was going to feature these queer characters and experiences, but that you also still wanted it to be a much bigger story than just a queer story? Or did it just kind of happen that way? I rambled a little bit there, so you can take the question in whatever direction you want. Basically, I just want to talk about the importance of, your stories being more than just an LGBTQ plus story. So I do think I want to start with Robyn, not to like pick on you, Robyn, but you have a very established series, and I do think yours is a really good example of, yes, these are diverse and marginalized characters, but in such a bigger storyline. So I did want to start off with you and get your thoughts on that.
Sure. I always say I don't write for a queer audience. I don't write for LGBTQ folks. I don't write for trans folks. I write legal thrillers, and I call it my Mary Poppins method. You give people what they want. I want to appeal to anyone who loves legal thrillers. So that's their spoonful of sugar. You give it to them. Here's a legal thriller. And then you give them the medicine, which in my case is to try to educate them a little bit about the transgender experience and what it's like for transgender people. So yes, that was my goal going in. I mean, I had that, I said the old bromide, write what you know. I am a lawyer. I am a trans woman. So, I clearly was going to have trans characters, but I want people who love John Grisham, who love, any of the, Scott Turow, any of the great legal thriller writers to say, oh, you should read Robyn Gigl. She writes really good legal thrillers. And then if they get educated a little bit along the way, then I've really done what I wanted to do.
Right. Perfect. I love that answer. It's great. Amy, I want to jump over to you next because, especially with rom-coms, we are slowly starting to see more and more LGBTQ plus representation in rom-coms, which is amazing. It's been so long since we all have been fighting that fight. So I'm curious, for your perspective, what was your approach? Did you go in knowing that you wanted it to be that type of story, or did it just happen as you were writing?
Yeah, I'm like, I completely agree with what Robyn says, but also I did the opposite. I thought a lot about like the L word and how everyone was just sort of like conveniently queer. Like everywhere you went, there was just always someone willing to like hook up in a bathroom or like have like some sort of like situation in a prison. There was always something going on where you're like, what are the chances that all these lesbians are together? And you're like, what? I like this world. I would like, so I thought, what if it was like that, but functional people who actually talk to each other and do not cheat on each other all the time. Very important to me. So I thought like, I'm just going to do that. I feel really fortunate that despite that this is my first book for adults, this is my like, oh my gosh, 8th book. I love that I've forgotten. I think that's really awesome.
Yes.
But I wrote like 4 books that felt very heterosexual. Well, I wrote them, so they're not, but like they're like featured characters who were in like heterosexual relationships, etc. And I kind of felt like I had to do that. I felt like that's all like people wanted to buy, like 2013, 2014, etc. And when I sort of like gave myself permission to write queer main characters, I was like, oh, it's so much easy. Like I never thought about the fact that maybe I was like struggling to write straight characters because I wasn't.
Right.
Because to me, I'm like, well, that's just the norm of society. I'll just do that. And it's like, I felt like someone like opened a door I didn't know was there and I ran through it. I'm like, I'm not running back through the door. So yeah, I've just been writing super queer situations and I'm really going to keep doing it. But I also feel like I'm lucky because so many people wrote stories like that before me. And so like, I feel like I haven't had to maybe do that work. And that's why I'm lucky enough to get to do it.
Right.
Whereas I feel like in a genre like Robyn's, I'm like, I don't know. I think it's incredible you're doing that work because it's not like, well, here's the other 5, trans thrillers I can think of. I can't.
Right.
So I'm just like, that's you have like, you were really educating people. I think it's amazing.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And then I do also, CJ, I really want your perspective on this part of the conversation as well, because, there's really maybe a handful off the top of my head that I can think of these quosies, the queer cozy genre. It is it is a baby subgenre, which is so exciting and very fun to see growing. But I'm curious, since it is such a new subgenre, did you go in consciously knowing that you were going to do a cozy mystery that happened to have queer characters? Or, were you a little bit more like Amy, where you're like, no, I'm doing a queer story, but we'll make it a cozy along the way?
Yeah, I would say it was a little bit of a mix between Robyn and Amy. I knew from the start that I wanted to write, a queer story. But I would say that it was also a conscious choice, especially when I started reading cozy mysteries during the pandemic. I was really comforted by them. I really enjoyed how lighthearted they were, and I liked reading about the close-knit community, especially during the pandemic when I couldn't see my friends in person. It was very comforting. But I couldn't find really any queer cozy mysteries at that time. There were a couple of self-published ones that I really enjoyed, but I wanted to read, more, and I couldn't find that as a reader. So I thought, if I can't find it, I'll try and write one. And yeah, I've really enjoyed seeing that genre grow over the past couple of years. Sometimes it is a little bit difficult seeing reviews sometimes where readers are like, oh, I wanted to take a chance on this cozy mystery, but it has queer characters, so I think I'll move on this one. Which is kind of sad to me, because I feel like even if, a reader themselves isn't queer people are human beings. You can relate to them on a human level, regardless of whether or not you yourself are queer. And so that's something I'm also trying to accomplish with Bored to Death, I think, is to, both, have queer readers kind of, see themselves reflected in the characters in some way, but also show readers who may not be queer that, these stories are human stories. Yeah, rather than, like a stereotype, I guess.
Yes, very well said. Thank you. I love that answer. I love all three of your answers. I think they're so great because it really, one of the reasons I wanted to ask that question and talk about this particular topic is that, like I said, publishing moves very slowly. And there was a very long time where the only queer stories we got to see were very sad queer stories or stories about having to come out, having to struggle, having to fight. And it is so refreshing now that, case in point, we have three very different genres, three very different situations, and none of them really have that sad story moment. It is just like CJ, like you said, they're people. They're just people. They have regular things happen to them, but they're in a book, so they have slightly exaggerated regular things happen to them, but they're still just people. And I do think that's really important. So I'm glad to see it expanding more and more. So I'm glad we got to talk about it. All right, I'm going to jump to some reader questions now. I did have a question. One of our readers was curious, CJ, like what inspired you to make your debut a cozy mystery? You did kind of just touch on it. I don't know if you wanted to expand on that anymore or if you felt good with that answer that you just gave.
Yeah, I would say a little bit of what I said earlier. I found it a really comforting genre, and writing the beginnings of what would eventually become Bored to Death during the pandemic was a little bit of escapism. My husband and I, not so much during the pandemic, but before and after, we'd spend a lot of time in board game stores. That's kind of his hobby, is playing different board games with his friends. And so I found it a really comforting and interesting community and environment. And, having kind of been introduced to the cozy mystery genre at around that same time, I thought it would make a really good setting for one. Yeah, so that's a little bit of the background on why. I also really wanted to write a lighthearted queer story for a lot of the reasons you mentioned, actually. Going and coming out as trans as a BYU student was difficult for me for a lot of reasons, but in part because I couldn't really imagine a happy future for myself because I didn't have stories around me that were very happy about queer people in Utah. And so I really wanted to write a story about, someone who's in maybe a not especially accepting environment that is still able to find people that, you know, he connects with and find love and find happiness, even though it is a murder mystery. That was part of my goal.
Perfect. I love that answer. Thank you. And then I wanted to ask that because I have, since your book isn't out yet, readers aren't able to leave this type of comment, but we do have 2 reader comments for Robyn and Amy that I want to give a quick shout out to. Robyn, we have a reader that said that they've gotten to read Remain Silent and they thought it was terrific. They absolutely loved the book. So I want to give that a shout out. And then Amy, same for you. One of our readers left a note saying that the spice for her consideration is chef's kiss, which I always love that description. And they love that the characters aren't a complete mess and are super relatable. So want to give shout outs to those 2 very sweet comments from readers. All right, and then we're gonna ask some fun questions. Readers just left us a couple of fun questions that I really love, and luckily they tie into the fact that I really wanted to talk about board games since CJ's book is all about board games. So readers were on the same wavelength as me. All right, so let me see if I gotta scroll back now and find the question. All right, so the very first question is, CJ, what is your favorite board game? And then Robyn, Amy, we're going to go to you next. So try to think of any board game you've ever played. If you're like me, you just went blank entirely. So CJ, we're going to start with you since your book is the board game book. What is your favorite board game? And then let's also extend it. What is Ben's favorite board game?
Oh. Yeah, that's a big question.
Yes.
Yeah, off the top of my head, one of my favorites is this game called Wingspan, which is, it's a really beautiful and kind of low stress game. You collect different birds and you know, there's a fun fact for each bird on each card, which I think is really cute. And you just kind of try to collect different birds that match whatever your goal is for that round, and you know, help them gather the most eggs. It's a really low stress game, which I like. Some of them, like Scrabble, actually can be very stressful, right. but fun in a different way. But I really like a board game where you can kind of like decompress at the end of the day. As far as Ben, oh, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
As far as Ben's favorite board game, one thing that I touch on a little bit in the book is he really likes co-op games, which stands for cooperative. So as opposed to a competitive game where there's only one winner, it's a game where, you know, where everyone who's playing is working towards a common goal. A couple example of those are, well, there's one called Pandemic. Mysterium is another really fun one. I kind of think of it as kind of like I guess a more creative version of Clue. You're like solving a mystery, and then one person plays as a ghost that kind of gives you clues through these little colorful cards. So yeah, I would say that those are probably more of his speed.
Perfect. I love that. Again, Ben and I would get along great. I am not a competitive spirit, much to my best friend's complete ire. All right. And then Amy, how about you? What is your favorite board game? And what do you think Nina's favorite board game would be?
You know, I used to play like more board games. I feel like my friends used to be a little more board game centric, and then it's less so now. I did play Pandemic once, and I found it very stressful because, I mean, this was pre-COVID, but still, we lost the world to an illness. It felt dramatic. I mean, I feel like I love Scrabble, and that's like a real basic answer, but I do love Scrabble. Nina, here's what I think about Nina. I think Nina is, do you know, like a lot of times in a group, like most people want to play the board game, and then there's someone who's like, and they're like not behaving. I feel like that might be Nina. I feel like she might just be like having a cocktail and like looking at her phone, and everyone else is annoyed. But I think Ari, her love interest in the book, I think Ari would take it super seriously and get very competitive. And so they might be like a minor squabble about the board game afterward.
I was about to say, Ari, I do believe would be the one like at Monopoly with the rule book in front of her face the entire time.
And Scrabble would have the dictionary. Absolutely.
Right.
Yes.
Absolutely. All right, Robyn, how about you? Do you have a favorite board game? And what do you think Aaron would like to play?
Well, so first of all, I have 3 children who are all in their 30s. And every summer their significant others, our grandkids, we all go on vacation together. And I hope my kids never watch this, broadcast, because
Oh boy.
they all love board games. And that's what they do every night after their kids go to bed, is we play board games. Could I name one of them? Not a one. All right. For at least a week, usually in August, every night I'm playing a different board game that I have no clue what I'm doing, because they play all the time. And so, CJ, I have to get all of my kids your book, because I'm sure they're going to love it, because they all love board games. And so, again, it's what I do for a week in the summer, because I love my kids and they love doing it. And I'm like Amy's character. I'm the one playing the board game, but having an extra cocktail, because this is not my thing.
Right. I think that's totally fair.
That's exactly how my family reunions were growing up. And my parents were exactly like that. They were more of the like, watch everyone else play the board game. So I totally get that.
Yeah, I even as I was asking the question, I was like, when is the last time I ever played a board? I think maybe Settlers of Catan, and only because like my best friend and her husband play, but my family is much more of the dominoes and spoons and like that era, and like nerds and like card games. But we're also too big and too competitive to play those. So our family's really not allowed to play games. So I'm interested in everyone else's answers. I will say, CJ, one of our readers said that your character Ben should definitely check out Betrayal at House on the Hill.
I love that game. It's a
Okay,
very
perfect.
good game.
There you go. So shout out for that
It's a fun
game
one.
too.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and then let's move on to our next reader question. Actually, I'm going to skip that one. We're going to do it at the end. We're going to do one more fun question. You may not think it's a fun question. It's going to be a stressful, hard question, but I think it's going to be fun. If you could take one thing to a desert island, can't be a book, what are you bringing with you? Let's start with Amy. What are you taking with you to the desert island?
A really large refrigerator full of Diet Coke.
You would get along so well with one of the girls on our team that all she ever wants is Diet Coke. So perfect.
Let's see if I can show it. I got a tattoo of it. Hang on. Oh my God. My arm won't go that way. Anyway, you can see it. My Diet Coke tattoo I just got.
I love it.
I'm insane. I love it.
I love that. Perfect. I think that's a great answer. And, then you can also like just stick your head in the fridge if it gets too hot. So like perfect.
Yes. And maybe you could befriend someone. You give them a Diet Coke, they can help you off the island.
See, I like it. You're thinking like 3 steps ahead. Great choice. Robyn, how about you? What are you taking with you to a desert island?
Well, I'm taking this, but not to get service to call and get off the desert island, but because it has all my music on it. And I would be lost without music. So
very, very smart. I am also that way. Like I cannot exist without music playing all the time. So 100%. Great choice. CJ, how about you? What are you taking with you to the desert island?
I'm the same way with music. It's either that or podcasts, especially, with like working from home. That's like what gets me through the day. But as far as a desert island goes, it's going to sound really impractical, but I would probably bring like my knitting loom and some yarn. Because like when I'm stressed, I really like to knit because it helps me like kind of like think through things and like have something to kind of like focus on while I'm thinking. So I think maybe that would help me, not panic and think to get out of the situation somehow. Maybe knit a raft, but that probably wouldn't work.
So say I if you could do that, like we could make $1 million. Like we'll make it a reality TV show and everything. I think that would
CJ, don't get on that raft. It's going to sink.
That's a lot of holes.
I think it could be dangerous. I love to ask my dad if he thinks that's possible. He is a big knitter, so and he's made some pretty insane things. So, well, I'll get his opinion on that one. But I do like the idea of taking it for de-stressing. So
Mhm.
that's something at least. Perfect. All right. And then I'm curious, do you remember the first book you read that made you think, I want to do this? I want to write. I want to be a writer. I want to share stories with other people. You know, and if you don't remember what that book was, then just if you want to shout out like your lifetime favorite book that you just have always thought of, that is an acceptable answer too. But I'm curious, I don't remember who I asked to go first last time, so I'm gonna eeny, meeny, miny, mo this. Oh, Robyn, were you volunteering? Okay, great. Robyn, you go first.
Okay. I always say that probably the most impactful book that I read was Catch-22 by Joseph Heller. I was probably about 14 or 15. I was probably too young to read it.
Right.
But up until then, I guess it was between my freshman and sophomore year in high school. And up until then, all the books that I read were things that you had to read for school, the classics, all those kinds of things. And then I was on vacation with my family, and in the house that we were staying in was a copy of Catch-22. And I picked it up and I started reading it. And it just blew me away. I never knew that you could do with a novel what Joseph Heller did with Catch-22. I mean, first of all, he got a word into the vernacular. Catch-22, right. Everybody uses it. Everybody knows what it means. Right. So it's amazing just to start with. But I mean, it's funny. It's sad. It's satirical. It's dark. It's laugh out loud funny. It's all things that are possible with a novel in one book. And I never knew, at that age that you could do those things. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. And the first novel that I ever started back in 1980 was going to be my Catch-22 of the legal profession. It's my briefcase novel. It still sits in a briefcase, written on yellow legal pads, but that was the most influential book.
I love that. That's such a great answer. You are making me feel a little embarrassed that I definitely didn't pay attention in school and maybe only read a few pages of that book, but your answer makes me want to go read it. So there is that. Amy, how about you? Do you remember the first book that made you think, I could do this, I want to do this, or just the book that has always stayed with you?
I was always obsessed, I think, with story and storytelling as a kid. So I basically, as soon as I found out that like it was someone's job to do the stories, whether that was like TV or books, I was like, that will be my job. I will be a writer. Right. So I feel like immensely like proud, but also like grateful that like, literal childhood dream come true. Feels pretty good.
Right.
But I will say the books that have the most impact on me as a writer are two series about girls hanging out, and they are the Betsy Tacy books, which I think are a great alternative to Little House on the Prairie, which has some problematic elements now. I love the Betsy Tacy books so much. And of course, the Babysitter's Club, which is to me just like a seminal text. But it's like literally about like girls working together and girls who are not necessarily exactly alike and girls from different backgrounds. And obviously, if that series was written today, I have a feeling many of them would be queer. And as much as I want to, like, when I hear Robyn talk about Catch-22, I'm like, oh, she sounds so smart. I'm like, I'm sorry, it's the Babysitter's Club. Like that, it was life-changing for me. And wanting to tell stories like that made me feel like every month when I would like get the newest one and like read about these girls that felt like friends to me. I think that's at the heart of everything I'm still doing.
Yeah, and I will say, especially off of your point of like Robyn recommending Catch-22, you recommend Babysitter's Club. I'm a big proponent of there is no such thing as like a wrong or silly answer, especially for books that inspire you. Especially I work in publishing, and all day, every day, I hear people talk about these brilliant highbrow literature, nonfiction books. And then I come in from my team. I'm like, here's the spicy 7-star monster romance that I just read last night. So like all books touch everyone in a different way, and they're all very valuable. So I do want to like make that note. And also I agree. I think the Babysitter's Club would be very queer if it were written today. Like, and I would love that. All right, CJ, how about you? Do you remember the book that made you think this is something I could do, that I want to do?
Yeah, so there are two that come to mind kind of at different points when I was growing up. The first one when I was in around 5th grade was Percy Jackson. Like when I was a kid and I discovered that book, I remember telling my friends about it as the book I can't put down. Because like I don't know, like it was just funny and Percy was really relatable to me as a kid. And I felt like you just kind of like belonged no matter who you were as a reader. Like, you just felt like you would belong at Camp Half-Blood. And I really thought that was a really talented thing for him to do as a writer, was just draw anyone into the story. Which it seems like he still does as the series and offshoots have continued. And then when I was 15, I just moved, from my hometown, and I discovered The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. And yeah, sophomore year was a really difficult and confusing time for me, as I imagine it is for a lot of people. And that book was just so funny. It like helped me not think about, all my problems for a while and just, kind of enjoy this absurd little world. And that's something that on some level I want to do as a writer. I want to offer escapism and something kind of lighthearted for people who kind of need it.
I love that. I think that's perfect. It has been a long time since I've had someone mention Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, so love that shout out. I do also have to say, if anyone was watching our last Pride panel, you'll know Katie Siegel, author of Charlotte Isles is Not a Detective, also gave Percy Jackson series a shout out. So definitely, I do think, especially for younger generations, Percy Jackson was really, it's like, okay, no, stories, magic, I can do this, which I love. I think that's very special. All right, I've got 2 more questions. I'm going to try to squeeze them in as quickly as possible. We may go a couple minutes over our hour. One reader is curious, is there a genre that you would love to try writing that you haven't written yet? So obviously we've got cozy mystery, we've got legal thriller, rom-coms. What is a genre that you would love to try? Or if you don't know, what is one that you would be terrified to try to write? I'll take either answer. Let's start with CJ on this one, since you are the baby writer of the group, and I mean that in the most loving of ways.
Oh, I think that's a compliment. Or maybe.
It is.
Okay, well, good. As far as genres I'd love to try, I really enjoy romance. That's part of the reason that I wrote a little romance subplot in Bored to Death. For a lot of the same reasons that I like cozy mysteries. I like that there's sort of a guaranteed happily ever after at the end.
Right.
That's comforting in a way. I would like to try sci-fi or fantasy at some point during my career. I think it's something that I'd need to work up to, even though it's a genre that I love a lot. Mysteries come a little bit more naturally to me, but it is like a bucket list kind of project.
Love that. Yeah, mystery and sci-fi. Sorry, my cat is now trying to enter the frame. Mystery or sci-fi and fantasy is something I love to read, but also it seems very intimidating to try to write for some reason. I think it's so much world building. I would get lost very quickly. All right, Robyn, how about you? What is a genre that you would either love to try your hand at, or maybe a genre that you're like, I will never even attempt it?
I don't know if it's a genre as much as I'd like to try to write something that is funny and satirical. I mean, I write legal thrillers. There's a lot of dead bodies in my books. Right. And so I'd like to try something a little bit more lighthearted and funny and satirical. And so I don't know what genre it would fit into, but I do have hopes of writing something a little less, I don't want to say dark, because I don't think the Erin McCabe series is dark, but there's a lot of stuff going on.
Maybe a little less heavy. Yeah. I like the idea of maybe like a few less dead bodies or something like that. That might be a good way to approach it.
Yeah, there's always cozy mysteries.
There you go.
I can't see myself doing a cozy, CJ, but I want something funny. Not that
that's true.
Funny, but I mean, I haven't read yours yet, but I will. and maybe it's laugh out loud funny. I don't know.
No, I get what you mean, but whenever there's a
yeah.
dead body, it's like, oh, it can't be all the way, laughs.
Yeah, you can't laugh too hard at it if there is a dead body involved. I mean, I guess
Mhm.
depending on the dead body, maybe who knows. And then okay, let's jump to Amy. What is a genre that you would love to try, or a genre that you're like would never even try to touch?
It's so funny because I have this joke where I like with other writers and some of my friends where I'm like, you will never, no one ever dies in an Amy Spalding book. Like that is my promise. Like, and if there's like a cute pet, the pet's gonna live. Like no one dies.
Mhm.
So I can't write. Also, I'm very bad at mysteries. Like when I'm like if I read a mystery for children, I'm like, wow, I think I'm ahead of it, and then I'm still lost. So I could never write one. I would love to write like, do you know like Rainbow Rowell's Landline, where it's like a little speculative fiction, but it's mainly just
Mhm.
conversations about like life and like aging. I think I'd like something like that, maybe, where there's like a little fantastical element, but like I don't
Mhm.
want to get into the, like you said, CJ, like the actual like world building of like, no, I
Mhm.
don't want to do that. I just want like a magic phone, for example.
Mm. Yeah, I think like just a little bit of magical realism. That's probably also more my speed, but I'm the same. I'm like, I don't know if I could handle dead bodies in the book. What do I say? Again, it would depend on the dead body, I guess. Who knows? But love all of those answers. I think those are great. I'm going to squeeze in this one last question because it is a question from a reader, and it's a question we love to ask our authors when they visit. So Robyn, Amy, sorry, you have been asked this multiple times. I'm going to ask it again because I love hearing everyone's answers. Um, so the question itself, and we're going to tweak it a little bit since CJ, you are not only a debut author, but you are a young debut author. And the question is, if you could tell your younger writing self one piece of advice or something that you wish you had known or that you could go back and tell yourself, what would it be? And, CJ, I don't think we could get much younger on you at the moment. So what is for you, what is a piece of writing advice that you have learned through the process of becoming a debut author that you would love to share with others? So let's start with Robyn because you have a number of books under your belt now. What is something that you wish, you could tell your younger writing self before you had started that first book?
Oh boy. I guess it's never give up.
Mhm.
Because as I said, I started that first book in 1980. And there almost 40 years in between before I became a published author. Um,
Mhm.
so I mean, it's I guess advice that I ultimately followed, but
Mhm.
um, just never give up. Don't take the rejections that come along the way as negatives. Take them as
Mhm.
positives. Learn from them. Um,
Right.
I have another manuscript that got me my agent, but was never published, was never acquired. But I learned so much from that process, and I think it helped make me a better writer. So don't be afraid to make mistakes. Don't
Mhm.
be afraid of rejection, and never give up.
Love that. I think that's a great answer. Amy, how about you? Is there something that you would tell your younger writing self? And it doesn't have to be just about writing, it could be anything you wish younger you had been told.
Yeah, I mean, actually, kind of similar to my answer about books that inspired me. I think I really felt like if I was going to be a writer, I had to be like a great writer, and I had to write like I don't know about like a war or a famine or something, or
Mhm.
like something that was going to like make the world go, oh, a discovery, and
Right.
like that's just I just want to write cute people having cute banter and like learning about
Mhm.
themselves and having happy endings. And as soon as I accepted that that was okay, my writing got better. I got an agent, like I got a book deal. And it
Mhm.
was like I was trying to be someone I wasn't because I was afraid to like love the silly things I loved.
Mhm.
And the second I was like, this isn't what's silly about writing about like friendship and love and like wanting to be like the best person possible. So like follow your heart, write, if you want to write like monster porn, please go write monster porn. Don't worry. Like
Please,
that
please.
can be a great next American novel. So like go for it.
Yes. And you know what one person's great American novel is not someone else's. So for me, I'm always gonna pick the monster porn the serious war famine book can just go sit on a shelf somewhere. So you will be someone's favorite somewhere. CJ, how about you? What is something that you wish you had known when you started, or that you would tell someone else who is in your position, who is getting ready to become an author or hoping to become an author?
Yeah, this was something that I was thinking a lot about this past November, with it being about 10 years since I wrote, my first manuscript as when I was in high school. And one thing that I would say, especially to like during those first years when I was just like, writing all of the time and like really stressed because I couldn't, always make the word count goal that I wanted every day, which, I was a kid. I was, I should have maybe been focusing more on just like getting through high school and stuff. But I would say that I would tell them that the experiences that you have as, just a person going through life are just as important as the craft, and like inform your writing just as much. And so I would tell them to, definitely, it's good to have a writing routine and it's good to practice that as much as you can, but to like, try new things and new experiences and talk to, as many people as you can, because it will, both make your life richer and also inform your writing in ways that you might not expect.
I love that. That is a great answer. I will say my little social anxiety heart when you're like, go talk to other people.
Mhm.
I don't know about that part,
Yeah,
but
no,
I
same.
will
It's
try.
like a more of a practice what you preach kind of thing. I'm not great at that either, but
Right.
I'm always happy when I do.
Right. Absolutely. I agree. Those are amazing answers. Thank you all so much. This has been such a great chat. This was an awesome panel. I just cannot say thank you enough to all three of you. And thank you to our readers who were tuning in. You guys had some great questions, some really fun questions. If there are questions that you had that you didn't get a chance to ask, or maybe we missed it or anything like that, please drop them in the comments section. I may send a couple over to our authors over email. Maybe we'll see if we can get some extra answers for you guys. So if you have more questions, please feel free to drop them in the comments section. And yeah, come join us next week. We're going to have another author Q&A tomorrow. We're announcing our next book pick for the book club. And all three of these authors' books are being featured in our summer reading challenge. So if you haven't yet started your summer reading challenge, you have 3 books that can start fitting those prompts. So make sure you check them out. And thank you everyone for joining us, and everyone have a great and happy Pride. Bye guys.
Thank you.